Hello, thank you everyone for joining me today for this talk. I want to thank Luis Gabaldon and the National Park Services for this opportunity and for this lecture. The presentation is going to be focused on some parts of history of documentation through the efforts we have done recently and the survey of new technologies that are out there that we have been focusing on in the recent years. In architectural terms, measure drawing or documentation refers to the process of accurately recording the existing details of a building by taking precise measurements on site and then translating these measurements into detail scale drawings, including plans, elevations, sections, and details to create a comprehensive record of the structure. So, any way in which you can completely process and extrapolate information related to the building in the form of architectural drawings is referred to documentation in architectural sense of measure drawing. Now, generally though, there have been three primary approaches of documenting this site. These have been beyond the scope of just the architectural recording that we know and we discuss as part of the definition given by National Park Services. One of the earliest recorded forms of evidence is actually historic documentation, which involves collecting and compiling verbal written histories from previous generations. And this method creates a historical record that serves as the evidence from the documenter's time, preserving these histories so that future generations can read and understand them. An example of this is the work of Homer and other ancient scholars who have identified and created written histories that tell us about a culture and a time period that we have very little knowledge of beyond the scope of what the historians have written. Another way of documenting, which is another lens or another perspective on the ways in which documentation works, is visual documentation, where documentation is conveyed through artistic or pictorial forms, such as paintings or accurate forms in photography. These visual records can be accurately represented or are imaginative representations of history. They are reinterpretations, sometimes based on the artistic taste of the person. For instance, Veronese's work falls into this category as he often created capriccio scenes, artful, somewhat playful, yet realistic portraits of architectural ruins. Similarly, landscape paintings by various artists capture buildings and ruins within their environmental settings, like the depiction of the Campo Vecchio at the Roman Forum, that provides insight into the forum's appearance before the earliest excavations. And it tells us about a lost sense of how the people, the material culture, and that of the culture of the place, so tangible and non-tangible heritage of the place used to exist. And this is recorded through these paintings and depictions that allow us to get a better sense of what the history of this place would have been or how it would have felt. The third form, and the form that actually is relevant in our case of work, is documentation and a focus on the work that is architectural drawings, a tradition that flourished from the Renaissance through 18th and 19th century. During these periods, many architects traveled, for example, to Rome, and as part of their training, visited sites like the Roman Forum to study ancient ruins. By closely examining these monumental structures, architects gain insight into the assembly, form, proportion, and composition of temples, and often significant buildings from antiquity. This knowledge was essential as there was limited material available beyond Vitruvian treatises as to examine and guide architects on the principles of ancient design. So basically, what they would do is they would try and get a copy of Vitruvian work. They would examine and understand the proportions of study that were done during this time And then they would actually produce them in the form of uh, line drawings that were capturing on site the information that was to be collected. And so what it did was it trained the eye with proportional composition that was written in the theoretical text of Vitruvius. So Vitruvius formed the earlier basis of how proportions need to be examined, and then architectural line drawings created the understanding of how these proportions were actually articulated within building design. And the combination of these two allowed for a much better understanding of how measure drawing worked. Through measure drawings, Renaissance architects could analyze the ruins directly, forming a deeper understanding of ancient construction methods that they could then apply to new architectural design. For example, the design of Renaissance basilica evolved from the ancient marketplace form, and large vaulted spaces in baths inspired similar architectural intervention in public buildings. Over time, these studies influenced not only grand public structures, but moreover, imitated forms such as villas, pavilions, farmhouses. This transfer of knowledge to both from the monumental scale to contemporary architecture is a key use of measure drawing. Measure drawings can be used in architectural sense of form, not only to understand composition, but also to give a sense of how these designs can be interpreted in new proportion and new design compositions for the needs of today. Now I'm going to briefly describe Dharma Lab, which is basically digital documentation of World Heritage Sites. It was established in 2006, and the goal of digitally documenting World Heritage Sites with the intent of helping the conservation efforts record their current state and generate new insights into their condition and histories. Dharma Lab specializes in revolutionizing the field of documentation, leveraging innovative methods to achieve unparalleled precision and depth. Founded in 2006, it has over 18 years of fine-grained detailed data with up to 1 millimeter accuracy, and it allows, for example, in the case of one of the projects, which is the Roman Forum, for huge amounts of new insights into the site than previously available. Over recent years also, we filled a unique niche in pioneering approaches that combine large-scale surveying techniques and cutting-edge scanning technology, including some of the work that I will be presenting here. NASA's principal work has been applied to some of the efforts that Dharma is doing. For example, the use of some of the technologies that were used in the Mars rover mission. How does that work with documentation? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. For example, the Dharma documentation works on two key principles. One is a research agenda, and what kind of research question are you asking before you document a site? Why are you documenting this site? And what is the research agenda for it is critical in imposing the method and approach that you're going to have for documenting the site. The second one is practical conservation of the site. What does the client want? Typically, the clients are authorities that have been maintaining and protecting the site for a long time, and you want to understand what type of conservation efforts need to be in place to be able to get this to be effectively utilized. And so based on if this is a practical conservation project, there's a different approach in documentation than when it is a research-based documentation of the site. Each time, there may be the same use of tools, but the approach of what the tools would contain and how they would rely on is different. Today, we are going to talk about the research part of the conversation. The practical conservation of site will be covered by hopefully other speakers in the next days, but the research part is potentially what we are going to explore in the next slides. So what is important when we go on a research expedition on a site is we identify and create an exhaustive analysis of architectural and urban landscapes, where we are starting to obtain data sets that are meticulously cross-referenced with archival information. And to be able to do that, we identify and work with three different techniques. One is the work that we do on pre-site, on-site, and then after on-site expeditions are done in off-site work that takes place. So these three key parts are essential in identifying the reasoning behind our approach and methodology of work that we do. And I'm going to start with pre-site work. The pre-site work involves compiling all existing documentation of the site, including drawings such as plans, sections, sketches, details, and elevations, as well as written histories and theoretical perspectives. This creates an elaborate library of information for reference during the on-site survey and post-processing. The pre-site phase relies heavily on archival research. Here, the existing studies, measure drawings that have been done by previous scholars over the centuries are collected, examined, and analyzed for use by the team. The key aspects examined are: what information does the site history, construction, materials used, and transformation available produces? Does it contain all the required drawings for the site? What kind of research questions should be formulated to examine the site? Depending on how extensive the site information is, the longer it may take to go through this process. And it may examine, collect, and understand how much of the process work needs to be put into the research question that will be proposed for the site. It also identifies, for example, that archival documents help in establishing a specific research question of the study, and also form the basic material for the on-site notes and marking. It also gives the team a sense of scale of the site. For example, before one begins an expedition to in this case, to the Roman Forum, research was conducted to examine the area under consideration for the study using previous scholarships on the site. As in case of the Forum, the urban plan of the Forum was not as easily available, and initially the work had to be done to collect Google Earth data sets and drawings from previous scholars as earlier as Lanciani, to be able to get information about the site. Here is one of such books that we were examining. This is on the Temple of Vesta that Lanciani wrote in early 1884, and it is still an extremely useful archival data set that we had to work with to get a better sense of what was known about the site. The team collected, reviewed, and analyzed previous scholarship in the field, and then created a plan to complete on-site survey work. That would form the basis of this project and provide a crucial overview of the past documentation of the Forum. In this case, right now on the slides, you are seeing the preparatory work we do before we go on site. This is for Vatican and the upper cortile of Vatican. And all the drawing markings that you see on top are basically telling us positions that we are going to place our instruments on. And typically you want to make a map of this so you get a general sense of the scale, scope, and effort that is utilized or needed to be utilized on site. And then also the number of days that will be needed to create the exact number of scans and gigapan. Now, seeing this, always remember that pre-site work has some amount of accuracy to it. when you go on site, you may see certain concerns. When you're working on site, there may be gaps of information collected. Maybe there's something that happens that day while you're collecting the information. So you need to also be able to change plans if need be. But what it does is in the pre-site work, you also create a collecting method or a catalog of method of approach for the site. So typically we create information collection categories for day one, day two, day three of each part of the on-site expedition. And we also create an understanding of what type of instruments we are going to use on which days and where they will be located. Preliminary site visits are conducted to examine the terrain. So additionally, we also look into a preliminary site visit, at least one if possible, so one can get a sense of the terrain. Visibility of specific monuments, for example, in the Forum project, this was an extremely difficult terrain, and which is not the case in the Belvedere project, where the site is much more stable. And so at the Forum, we have to understand where we are going to place our instruments and what is the visibility between the terrain and the specific monuments on site to create a detailed survey. Let's go to on-site work now. The on-site phase is the most intense and crucial period of the project. It requires high level of coordination and ensuring that all team members have the necessary permissions to access the site. The site survey is conducted daily from sunrise to sunset over a period ranging from 10 to 30 days, depending on how big the terrain is and what needs to happen. It's typically the shortest period of both the pre-site and off-site work, but it is most intensive in its manner of recording and information collecting. The team divided into groups. The survey is conducted by creating teams that are divided into groups working on, according to the pre-site planning, on which instruments and what locations will be created. Each evening, the collected data in various forms is cataloged and saved into a database to ensure ease of post-processing and quality control. So for example, here you can see we are looking at 5 different techniques that we use on site. And on site, we do examine the historic documentation that we have already brought with us. And on that, with trace paper, we create field notes. And then beyond that, we use 3 tools. One is photogrammetry, the other is gigapan technology, and the last one is 3D scanning. In case of the Roman Forum, the overall site was divided into large parts. The first area of focus was the original Forum site, and then the second part was the extended version. Because of the colossal scale of the site, we sometimes have to break down the site into multiple expeditions. And this was the case in the Forum site because of the gigantic and colossal scale. Vatican, for example, also has 2 expeditions that we have planned, but the Colosseum and the Forum have the most amount of expeditions that we have done till date. The scans are typically made at a resolution of at least 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter accuracy. So let me explain to you what happens with the different tools that we take into consideration. This is, for example, 3D scanning technology used with 3D scanners. Today in the field, you have many sellers, commercial sellers that work on this technology and have raided the market with multiple different scanning techniques. You can easily purchase a cheaper version of scanner in the field that doesn't have such a long span or long distance. And they are useful mostly for interiors or facades. But when it comes to large or long-range scanners, They are extremely helpful with high resolution. They are extremely helpful for monumental scale documentation. For example, the use of P40 and P30 was from Leica was useful for the work we were doing in certain parts of the Forum and the Vatican. And previously, we've used all kinds of scanners from Leica to be able to examine and understand which scanner performed better. Beyond that, there is also something called the LiDAR technology. It's the same as the scanners, but except you're now on, either using a drone or you're actually using an airplane, and you're doing the same thing. You're measuring the distance with laser scanning to understand and survey a site, a much larger topographical site, for example, urbanscapes and cities. Both of these techniques are essentially very helpful to get 3D coordinates. The LiDAR technology has lesser resolution than what you would get from land-based 3D scanning, but the technology is improving pretty fast. And so over time, we're going to find more and more precision in the LiDAR technology and less need of utilizing land-based scanning mechanisms. Here, for example, you will see the work that has been produced through the efforts of 3D scanning the Roman Forum. This is when you're applying the images that were produced by the scanner during the photography period of the scan. So the photographs that are taken along with the scans, and then you can merge the two together. It's a patented technology also utilized by Dharma. The second technique or tools we used on site is GigaPan. And GigaPan is a technology that was created by Carnegie Mellon and NASA on the Mars rover mission. And what they basically did, it's the technique by which you're taking not one photograph, but multiple photographs, and they are naturally stitched together based on common elements. So you are basically having the technique of image recognition, and then you are stitching those photographs together. So instead of taking a single picture, you're taking maybe 500 images of the same object. And when you do that, and when you put them together, what you get is an extremely high-res image that can go up to multiple gigabytes and allows you to zoom in at very high detail. Here you can see an example of how GigaPan technology works. This was a technique we used in 2010, and it's still prevalent and extremely helpful. It's a size of 1 gigabyte file size, and you can easily see, for example, when the images are, when you zoom in into the image, you are basically able to see at extreme high resolution. These monuments are colossal in scale, and normally you have to use binoculars or scaffolding to be able to examine these details. But the use of the GigaPan technology allows you to focus much more in detail. By the way, this image can be also, you can go further into the image to examine each of the orders and the details on it, or if taken at a very high res, you can even notice the cracks or any kind of concerns in a building. So extremely useful for conservation practices and useful to understand where and what the concerns may be. The third technique we use is field notes. Now, field notes are very essential. I don't think 3D scanning eliminates anything, nor does GigaPan eliminate anything. You cannot just use one technique if you're doing this as a research project. You can, of course, just use one technique if you're going and asking a specific question that you want to understand and examine, or want to collect information and use that as field study. But if you're truly asking a much more larger research question, it is important to have field notes collected on site. What you basically do in field notes is you give some understanding of the materials that are used on site, and any other visual or recorded information you see that cannot be put in as part of the scanning or as part of the GigaPan or measure drawing site. So this is one of the bays at the Belvedere in Vatican, and you can see there are lots of detailed field notes that have been taken here that help us understand what type of material was used, what type of concerns are visible on the site, what are the details that are seen in the form of molding profiles, and the material plaster or stucco or any other information that needs to be collected about that site. Typically, this is also a great place where you create information regarding water damage on the site, or when you see any concerns related to how the structure is behaving or the performance of the structure and so on and so forth. Again, these, depending on the kind of documentation you are doing, get supplemented with a lot more detailed records. For example, if you're doing a structural study of the site, there would be an FEM model that would be associated to the structure. So this is just a preview of what you see and examine on the site itself. And then finally, in the case of some of the work we have done in the recent years, for example, in the forum, is hand measure drawing, where we basically take measure drawings of the site. Now you will ask, now why do you take measure drawings when you've already collected the scan data? The scan data should be able to give you everything you need. It's not true. When it comes to detailed information about individual pieces of monuments, there is a lot of information that can get lost in technical data. And so we always back up our knowledge with hand measure drawing. And so you can see, for example, here is a student measuring the base of Temple of Saturn, and you can see how colossal the scale of these monuments is. I mean, he's looking like a little figure in comparison to the overall profile of the base of the temple itself. And these are in similar ways captured to understand the overall proportion of the monument itself. So this, for example, is the Bramante capital detail at Vatican, examining and understanding each piece of it, the profile, the nuances of those details that are hand drawn and then hand measured and then collected and recorded. While we are doing that, we also photograph these details, and then we catalog these photographs to go along with this information. Typically, we try and also use photogrammetry if we can on the site to be able to record also measurable images through this site. If not, we try and collect at least general profile images that allow us to go back and concentrate on some of these details when we go back for post-processing of the information. Here you can see another of those detail scale drawings that have been done on site. The last piece, last but not the least, is post-processing. The post-processing part is generally, pretty extensive in its case. So, for example, post-processing phase involves processing the collected data over months and years to create multiple deliverables. Based on the results, further expeditions are planned to gather additional evidence about the specific parts of the survey that require further evaluation. This phase also includes transformation of the raw information, drawings, and field notes collected on site into final outputs and deliverables. The post-site phase is the most extensive, and it integrates and analyzes all the information from the previous phases to produce and create collective, comprehensive results. Multiple expeditions over time can be combined to create one large model where possible to allow for a more comprehensive understanding of the site. So now with the kind of work that we did with pre-site and on-site information, we put this overall understanding in one common form. For example, here you will see the patented technology that we use in Dharma that combines from the efforts done by Center of Research Computing, the work of 3D scanning plus image recognition, and then putting a 3D model and a 2D image into something that acts as a comprehensive whole. This is the archoptitis, and the archoptitis has been documented in a 3D scan here in an extreme high resolution. And then the photographic image applied on top of it allows for the image to be very well connected to both the scan itself and the image information. Now, what that does is it allows a better understanding and a visual and referencing of the 3D information that has been collected. The other forms of information that get delivered, for example, are line drawings, watercolor drawings. Now, you'll say, why do we need these? But in reality, most of the archaeologists and architects that are on site actually appreciate many of these drawings coming to them because they are able to use them and refer to them for multiple purposes. Very often, I have seen that while 3D models are extremely visually appealing, they are difficult for non-specialists to be able to work with. And so deliverables include creating a full set of measure drawings for the people on site so that they are able to utilize those for purposes related to the actual conservation effort that they are doing. Here, for example, you can see the Vatican data for the Belvedere that has been put together. You can also see that, for example, these are multiple scans that have been provided, and we are combining that with a Rhino model to allow for it to be visualized with an understanding of how this would be transformed. This is Margaret Zhang's effort, and in which she's trying to combine these two techniques to allow for better visualization of the actual scan data that was produced on site. We also take the scan data, the gigapan imagery, and then start creating specific information at different scales for the line drawings. For example, depending on the scale at which information is needed, we can have large scale drawings, monument drawings, and even detailed drawings. Now, this is where you start getting into a variety of resolutions of information, and thus the production of, for example, in this case, how the material on site is behaving, what kind of preservation efforts would be needed, and also architectural drawings that allow for it to be visible in a manner that is not a ruin, but moreover that of an actual architectural elevation. Here you can see these line drawings are produced through combined sense of information that is from on-site and also knowledge that has been gained through the educational sense of the classical study of that is utilized at Notre Dame. So the team has a good understanding of what the language entails, and what that does is, for example, here is the capital of and the order of Temple of Faustina, and you can see that there is scan data, and then there is visual references taken from measure drawings done by different scholars from different time periods, all being collected and put together to create the final set of drawings that was created for the Temple of Faustina. These are meticulously hand-painted and have an extreme amount of time needs, but what that creates is these exemplary drawings that brings us back to the time of technique that was our odds plates were. So it allows us to have drawings that are giving us knowledge about how the site would have been architecturally when it was initially created and composed, and allows the knowledge of understanding from the ruins and deciphering what the temple truly wants to share. Beyond that, we have multiple other key outputs that are created. These include scholarly articles and a lot of software and hardware outputs. So, for example, you're going to see now a complex way in which we are putting data sets together. And what that allows us to do is to create extremely low resolution phone applications and apps, and extremely high resolution images that are, or visual transformation of the site as we can see things evolve for the future. So when you talk about where we are today and where the future lies, documentation is evolving at a very high pace. And when you think about new technology, how can we create documentation as a source for 3D visualization of information? So let me give you an example. If you're looking at the forum data, if we are able to achieve this in the most systematic way, you're able to understand a colossal site, which is close to 800 meters or to a kilometer in range, and you're still able to zoom in and also examine the most minutest detail about that site at the same time. Now, that is the evolution of digital understanding of the site for the future. And you're able to, at the same time, produce terrain information that allows you to examine the transformation of the terrain over this large scale or scope of the site. So remember, I was talking about how small the scale of the human being is in front of the base of one of these monuments. Now think about that base being right here, and then scale the whole site and see the scope of how big this whole site is, and how we are able to document at this colossal scale and at the same time make it available in different ranges and methodologies to allow for examining this site in a variety of ways. And this, our ultimate goal, is to find ways in which these outputs allow us to examine the site with library information, books, and other digital data sets, so that when you go to any of these web interfaces or portals, you're able to examine, work with the 3D model, and at the same time zoom in, zoom out, and then tag photographs, images, articles, and so on and so forth. So it becomes a comprehensive repository of digital data sets. So you're taking a simple intent of measuring, creating a measure drawing, to in the end, getting like a full comprehensive knowledge about the site as far as you can. And here is, I'm going to show you two demonstrations to end this talk. The first one is that of the mobile app that we have in the Dharma Apple interface. You can look up just Roman Forum and you should be able to download this app. It's free. And the second one is the 3D visualization that is available on our web portal, and how that works. And that demonstration would be given by one of our team members, Chase Brown, and his brother Chad Brown. Chad Brown is the one who's going to be speaking, but the whole team of visualization was working on that. So let me begin with the CRC created app. And then after that, I'm going to move to the computer science team that is collaborating, both of these collaborating with Dharma to create the outputs that we have here. The app that you see in front of us is designed for the use of the learning forum. This has been the 3D app designed by Dharma and along in collaboration with the particle. What you see here is the various monuments in the forum. If you click on Arch of Titus, you basically start seeing the individual monuments in higher detail. For example, here is Arch of Titus in the text associated to it, and the ability for a person to be able to rotate the model at will and to zoom in and out as they please to understand and examine the monument in detail. You can also click on the pictures that have been identified on the corner, and these images, when clicked, are showing high resolution photography that was done on the site. Upon further zooming in, one can actually see the way the stonework was sculpted and carved out, and these details, the way they are existing today in ways in which they inform how the patina has grown, how it has over time created a new knowledge on the construction techniques that were utilized, all can be visible through these images plus detailed models on the site. Thank you. And here is the visual data set that we are talking about in a few seconds by the Dharma visualization team and examining the monuments on a web interface.
Hello, my name is Chase Brown. On behalf of the University of Notre Dame School of Engineering, Department of Computer Science, and the Dharma Lab in the School of Architecture, I would like to demonstrate visualizing digital architectural data for heritage education. Here you can see three monuments: the Temple of Saturn, Temple of Vespasian and Titus, and the Arch of Septimius Severus. I'm able to navigate freely through this lesson space. I have a toolbar on the top left, which gives me the ability to switch between the mesh, reconstructed, and point cloud data sets. I have some tools to do measurements and view coordinates at a point. However, these are predominantly precursor tools to future work. We also have a lesson selector and three buttons to change the quality of point cloud data being rendered. As you can see, the user can interact with these annotations, which will orient them on the indicated monument. Hierarchical annotations and text boxes will then appear. From here, we're able to change the format of the data. Here, you can see the 3D reconstructed model. And here, you can see the reconstructed mesh that was created from the point cloud data. We're free to overlap these models as much as we'd like. And at any time, we can return to the original point cloud data. Clicking on the children annotations, we see images pop up to give us a clear understanding of details on the monuments. From here, we'll go ahead and look at some of the other monuments. Something I want to point out is the outlines generated around the mesh model are from the reconstructed models. We simply took the edge geometries and overlapped them with the mesh. This is to help the user visualize what the monument once looked like when it was completely standing. Thank you for watching this demonstration of visualizing digital architectural data for heritage education. Hello, my name is Chase Brown.
here's the full team that's working on the visualization data set. And this is what we are aspiring to do on large scale monuments of different locations. We're working on 3 projects right now, but hopefully we will get more and more of these uploaded for people to be able to explore and understand. I would like to thank all the people that have contributed over the years to the efforts of Dharma and all the student efforts that have been part of Dharma work over more than 18 years. And so I appreciate everybody who has put in long hours to make Dharma the way we see. We also appreciate and thank all our partners over the years that have allowed us to be able to do the work that we are doing today and hopefully get to the place where in the future we have more updates and information for you to share and contain. Thank you so much.